Hey, fairy tale friends, it's Ryan. Sorry for the audio, the bad audio quality here. This is late at night as I'm editing the episode. But I wanted to come in real quick and make a correction. In the episode, I oftentimes refer to the people of Afghanistan as Afghanis, which is incorrect. That's actually the Afghanistan monetary unit is an Afghani. What I should have referred to them as is their proper name, Afghans. And I do apologize for that. I apologize for being culturally insensitive, but wanted to come on and make this correction and let you guys know that I will do my best to do better in the future and do my research before something like this. So please ignore my ignorance and enjoy the episode.
I'm Tara.
I'm Ryan.
We love Disney movies.
So we decided to watch them all, from Snow White
To Frozen 2 and beyond. Each episode will watch a different Walt Disney Animated Studios film and tell you all about it.
Did we like it? Does it hold up? Who's our favorite hero?
Or villain.
We'll give you history and fun facts about each movie.
And sometimes we'll invite our friends to watch along with us.
So put on your tiara
Or your evil crown.
and join us on our adventure.
This is Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
Hello, fairy tale friends. Welcome to a Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries MiniTale. We're doing something a little bit different today. We may not be coming in as super energetic as we usually do. This one was a little bit of a hard one.
Yeah, let's talk about.
Let's talk about it. So the Oscars are coming up this weekend. Hello, Laurel. And our resident Oscar expert. We actually have watched except for Luca, we've seen every Best Animated Picture.
Which is surprising. We might have
year.
to watch Luca.
Yes, we should watch Luca before Sunday.
We're saving some Pixar stuff for when we do our Pixar run, but Luca probably needs to be watched sooner than later.
And when we looked at the list of nominees, there was Raya and the Last Dragon, Encanto, Mitchell's vs. the Machines, which is my ride or die for this.
Yeah.
Luca, and then Flea, which was one that felt different and one that wasn't really on our radars because of, kind of what has been the nature of this podcast leading up to this point. Mm-hmm. So we decided to watch it. It looked like an interesting. That's not to say it isn't interesting, but when we're in the past looking at it, we were thinking it looked like an interesting story. It was, the only thing I knew about it is foreign language because it is the first picture to be up for Best Animated, Best Foreign Language, which I now believe they're calling international.
Oh, okay.
Because there are international movies that are in English, and there's something I think a few years ago where that was an issue. And Best Documentary.
Yeah, and we should say that we saw it on Hulu. We borrow a...
Are you admitting to
Yeah, that's why I was like, cut it. Yeah, I'm not going to say it. We watched it on the basic plan of Hulu.
Don't ask us how or why we have the basic plan of Hulu.
And what I will say is we watched it in two parts. We watched about half of it and then paused and then watched the second half and are now recording right after that second half. And what we realized is there's a full version that is in Danish, Dari and Russian.
And
then
Swedish
there's
and some other language. Yeah.
And then there's also one where all the Danish is in English and then the other languages still exist with subtitles.
Yes.
So I actually liked that we watched both versions because I think we got an idea of what it felt like being all in subtitles versus having some English and then the rest of it being in subtitles.
And we also learned, so when we watched the Danish version, it had executive producers Riz Ahmed, I believe that's how you say his name, who was in Rogue One, was in The Night Of, was in Sound of Metal, is a... Oh gosh, I don't know his ethnic background, but he's an actor who I think looks like Jeremy. But we've kind of gone back and forth on that.
Yeah.
And then Nicolaj Calder-Waldo. Nicolaj.
All our Brooklyn Nine-Nine fans out there.
Who was, of course, Jaime Lannister in Game of Thrones. Were both executive producers, and when we started watching the English language one, they dub in the people. Now, they dub in the interviewer and the subject of the documentary, whose name is Amund. Now, Amund is actually the voice of Amund in the Danish version.
Yes.
So that it was interesting to look at both of them, but it was easier for Tara, who takes notes during these things, to not have to read a bunch of subtitles and write notes.
Without missing something.
So that was a little easier for us to do.
The next thing I think we want to cover,
yes, before we go into the actual,
is a lot of our episodes are family friendly. I would say this one is not because of the content. It's just very heavy. It's a very serious subject matter. And so I went to Common Sense Media, and there is a paragraph here. You can look it up for yourself, but I'm going to actually read it because I think it does a very thorough job, probably better than Ryan and I would do on the fly, on the cuff.
Yeah.
And it's under what parents need to know. So I thought I would read this, and then we'll go into kind of our review about what we thought about the film. Parents need to know that Flee is a profound Danish animated documentary with English subtitles, which we just covered, about a refugee's journey with tough themes and content, but always told with compassion and empathy. And I would agree with that. Amen. The subject of this documentary is incredibly courageous. Given that he's gay, there's an added element of self-discovery, becoming proud and comfortable in his own body and sexuality, all while he's experiencing homelessness. Amin encounters much discrimination along the way, both for being a refugee and for being gay. Archive footage intersperses the animation and shows disturbing imagery such as, and this is a pretty graphic description, blood-soaked corpses on the ground. That was in my notes. There were also corpses on fire, or they weren't corpses, and then there were people on fire.
I miss that.
When he's talking about fleeing Afghanistan.
You can tell when I'm watching a movie without my glasses, I guess.
Yeah, so that's in there. But the film in general is more affecting in its narration than in its visuals, including upsetting stories about human trafficking and a boat journey where people drowned. There are brief uses of the F word and glimpses of people smoking.
I will say in the English version, the F word was beeped out.
Yeah, but still something to be aware of and consider. And if your children are of the age that they can read the subtitles, I don't know how it's
Well, in the English version, it said bleep.
I see. Okay.
But he's clearly using the F word.
Yeah. Glimpses of people smoking, and a character is evidently drunk as he walks down the street. Mm-hmm. That I don't really recall, but the film offers...
It was the Moscow police.
That's right.
I think there was a lot of talk about them smelling of
vodka. That's
and
right.
Sort of things, and his distaste for them, considering how they treated him and his family.
Yeah. The film offers a platform to an underrepresented minority to tell their story on their terms in a hugely compassionate way that's full of humanity. So I wanted to read that because I think that summed up what I wanted to say, but I didn't have the words. And so I thought it was a good way to describe it. So for all the parents out there, or if, you're watching the Oscars and you hear this is nominated and you're curious about it, that kind of gives you a snapshot if you feel it's something you might want to watch. I think there are a lot of triggers within this story, and I think we kind of mentioned what some of those are in that description. So just be aware, know yourself or who you're watching it with. I think it's a very important story.
I think it's PG-13.
I believe so, yeah.
The F words in the Danish version, which I don't even remember them. I noticed them in the other
ones.
Yeah,
I don't recall. I think it's an important story, and I think it is something that you should watch. I highly recommend it. I know we usually save that for the end, but I also just wanted that disclaimer at the top of this episode.
And I think the last sentence in that description is very important in that it is a very authentic voice for this story, and you feel how, because he says at the beginning, there's revelations where he says, this is what I tell people because I think my asylum is dependent on this story that you find out later is a made-up story. Yeah,
and he was forced to make it up to receive asylum. You realize he really didn't have a choice,
right? And
to tell this story.
And there's a part where he says he had a boyfriend that he told that to, and the boyfriend, when they broke up, he used it against him and said,
when they were fighting, he would threaten that I'll turn you into the police.
Right. Yeah. So he's like, I have a hard time talking about this. So it's you're watching someone kind of deal with it, which I think was important to see in the Danish language ones, because as good as an actor as Riz Ahmed, I hope that's how you say it, is, and I think he did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting someone's authentic. I mean, you're getting the documentary view.
Yes.
Of someone not only telling you the story, but you're kind of seeing how he's dealing with it. And I will say this, which is a spoiler. If you really want to go in blind, it's a documentary, but I think it's maybe important to hear this next sentence. It ends well.
Yes.
Like there's a good ending, and that was a little hard for me watching it going, please let some there's a part where you think something's very bad's going to happen. I'll even say it. The him being gay is something he kind of talks about exploring a little bit as a young kid.
Yeah, he
during
knows
the whole
from
thing.
a young age. I wrote it down, but now I can't find it. But he talks about that journey, and the interviewer is a friend of his he met
From high
after
school,
after he claimed asylum. And so they're talking about it, and the interviewer asks him, when did you know? And it's Claude Van Damme.
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yes.
Yeah, he sees the Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, and he's like, oh, I really liked him. And the interview goes, well, I liked him too, but probably for a different reason. And they have like a good laugh over that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they keep showing like animated versions of him watching Bloodsport. So you get a little bit of
And
Bloodsport.
movie posters and
the
stuff.
movie posters
Yeah.
like look at him and wink and give him a thumbs up.
Yeah.
And he's just, he talks about that. He goes, because it's also, he's very young for a lot of this. So I think it's discovering, it's not necessarily like any sort of like discussion about sexuality and how he feels romantically, not about like discovering his body or anything like that. It's literally him going like, I like men, and just how he thought about it.
And the feelings he has along the way through this journey as well. And the other thing he mentions too is he talks about what it means to be gay in Afghanistan, or
right.
The fact that you really can't be gay in Afghanistan when he grew up.
It's
like
also
that the word
interesting.
he says homosexual, that term did not
There's
exist.
not a word,
There's not a word. And so I don't want to speak to that because I think he does a very good job talking about that, but he does address that in the film as well.
I mean, I think we should speak to it, but based on what we saw in the film.
Yes,
we're reporting, we're not editorializing.
Yeah. Basically what I'm saying is I didn't write down verbatim what he said, so I don't want to misspeak, but he does talk about it in the film.
I will say it's interesting in the beginning when he's walking through Afghanistan, he says he used to walk around in his sisters. He has older sisters in their
in their dresses.
Nightgowns and dresses, and it's funny because I was like, ooh, what are we going to see? Because I'm like on edge, like what are we going to see from these Afghani people reacting to it? And like one guy sprays him with water, but it looks like he's doing it like, oh, it's almond, like just, it doesn't look like he's like.
See, I didn't take it like that. I thought it was weird you laughed at that.
Oh, really?
I didn't take it lighthearted. I just was like, oh, that's kind of cruel that he did that to a kid.
Oh, well, that's a bummer because I really thought he was like,
maybe it was
oh,
meant,
you little scamp. Like, it didn't look like
maybe it was
that to
meant
me.
to be lighthearted. I just didn't. I thought it was weird that you laughed there, but yeah.
Oh, well, good to know. I mean,
I could be wrong.
Yeah, I guess it's open to interpretation. It felt to me like it felt to me almost like his because he's listening to Aha's Take on Me, so it felt a little bit like there goes the baker, like they were just like there goes Belle, like shrug, which I guess to me that scene almost felt crueler than how this felt. Now eventually when what's the name of the group that takes over in Afghanistan, the communists, they take
I wrote it down to try to say it right.
I'm also the Mahajin takes over. That's when I would expect it to be like he can't run around in that dress anymore.
Well, and he talks about the story that he's told. The interviewer goes on to say, there are many mysteries around how you got here, around how you got to Sweden, right? He's in Sweden now.
Oh, he's in Denmark.
He's in Denmark. About how he got to Denmark. And, the story is his family was killed and kidnapped in Afghanistan when the Mahajin took over.
Right.
That's not entirely true, but his father is taken away by the Afghanistan army, and they never know what happens to him. He's in jail for a little bit, and they visit, and then they no longer know where he is. And to this day, that was one of the things at the end of the documentary that they said they didn't know what happened to him. He has a brother who makes it to Sweden before they leave. He's sent so he's not pulled into the army, because basically that's one of the many reasons they leave Afghanistan is because the young men in his family, whether you want to or not, are recruited for, I mean, they're not recruited, they're forced to be in the Afghanistan army. And so he gets sent away and ends up in Sweden. And then they all eventually realize they need to leave because now the next oldest brother.
Yeah, the middle brother.
It's happening to him as well. So it's the middle brother, I think 2 sisters, and Amin and their mother. They all flee and they go to Russia. And what they realize is Russia, I think it's a year after communism fell in Russia.
Yes.
And so things are not great there either. People are starving. There's a lot going on. The police are very corrupt.
Extremely corrupt.
So there's a lot there when they're there, and the brother comes to visit, and they decide they're going to send the 2 sisters first. They don't have enough money, and this is where the human trafficking element comes into play, is trying to get them across the border. And it was a very difficult and intense journey for the sisters, but they do make it. The sisters make it.
But that's when they kind of talk about the sisters. Like the brother calls and is like, they're not talking.
Yeah, they were in shock, and
shock.
then they go into details about what kind of their journey was like.
Which is pretty intense. If you want to know more about that, you can watch the movie. But then there's the part where the mother and the 2 brothers go.
Yes, and again, they do this because their visas expire in Russia at this point, and so the cops know that, and they continually harass them, and so they have to pay them money to bribe them so they don't arrest them or turn them in for them not having the proper visa. They were able to get one when they first came over to Russia, I think, as fleeing from Afghanistan, but it's something that only lasted so long. So,
that's why they went to Russia, because they could get a visitor's tour, a tourist visa for a while.
Yeah, and so
so did a lot of other Afghani refugees.
Yeah, and so that's why they decide they need to try to leave, because all the money they're saving to try to pay a smuggler to get them somewhere safe winds up then being paid to the cops in Russia. So it's kind of this complicated issue. And so they try to make a first journey, and this I got, I think, as close as you can feel without living this situation, the way they tell this story.
Shortly thereafter, this is where we went, we need to stop and watch the other half later, which I think was a good idea.
It's very emotional, but they take this journey where it's one Russian with a gun, and it's a large group, maybe 20 or so individuals who are trying to flee. And there's some older individuals, including his mom, but there's one woman who can't keep going, and then they put a blanket under her and carry her, and the Russian wants to threaten to kill her.
He doesn't even threaten. He just goes, I'll shoot her.
I'll take care of it.
I'll shoot her.
Yeah.
And he goes, here, you can shoot her. And they're like, no. And he's like, okay, I'll do it.
And then Amin's and that was her son, that the Russian was saying that to.
And he was saying how much he was so happy that he was glad that woman couldn't speak Russian. Yeah,
so she couldn't overhear it.
Right.
And they wind up being on a
boat.
A boat. It's a ship, really, because like a cargo ship, essentially.
It looks like a cargo ship, but it's not very big.
Yeah, it's not very big. Well, and that was the sisters. The sisters were on a cargo ship, and they were put in a container.
Yes.
And then there were lots of containers around them, so they couldn't get out.
So can I jump to something that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah.
This movie is, I guess we did when you were a thing. It's interspersed with live action, news reports.
We touched on it in that blurb.
So they actually cut to the news report in Denmark or Sweden or wherever they got picked up. That is, we've just found a cargo. It's about his sisters, and they were in there, and they show that. So
and they show that the thing that mentioned about the corpses and whatnot. That's footage of when journalists were over in Afghanistan and things like that. So you do see coverage that were things he lived that they were able to match up with real images. Mm-hmm. And so they're put in this ship, and they're put in kind of the I forget what it's called.
The cargo hold.
The hull or the cargo. Yeah, the cargo hold. And
the mom, they say, is terrified of water.
And
so
has, I guess, a reoccurring dream or fear that that's how she's going to die.
Yeah, she goes, that's how I'm going to die, is water's involved somehow.
Yeah.
And so when they pull up to the boat, which I don't think they knew was how they were going.
Yeah, they had. I don't know that they were fully aware how they were getting to their destination.
They're like, how are we going to get Mom on this thing?
And so there's a very intense storm, and it starts flooding, and they're bailing water as it's pouring rain. They're on it for days, and this is the part that really got me, is this giant, huge ship comes up to them, and they think they're saved, and they're cheering, and they're so excited, and you realize it's a cruise ship. And there are tourists just taking pictures of them, and I don't think really realizing, I mean, they had to have realized they were refugees from...
I mean, I think it's what we have now, where everybody pulls out a phone when something...
Yeah, but they were all taking pictures, and they thought they were going to be saved, and they wind up
They say they go, we're going to pick you up, and we've alerted the...
Estonia.
No, we've alerted the Estonian Coast Guard, which I think is where they went through. They're going to get you and take you back.
Yeah, it's was it the Baltic Sea?
Balkan or Baltic?
I don't remember. I have it in my notes.
We're
somewhere,
terrible. You know where you could go is you could go look at the map right there.
I did write things down, but yeah, Baltic Sea.
Yeah.
From Russia, they were planning to get to Sweden over the Baltic Sea.
All you geography nerds are screaming at the podcast right now because you're like, of course, the Baltic Sea. But when they say we've contacted the Estonian Coast Guard, they're going to take you back. You see them; they all stop cheering and just like.
And they realize that they're not
saved.
Yeah, and so they're in Estonia, I believe, for at least 6 months or something like that. They're there for a while, kind of in like a holding.
It looks like just like an abandoned building they put them in, and eventually they're like, you have two choices. You can stay here and starve, or you can go back to Russia. And then it just cuts to them back at their apartment they were squatting
And while they're there in Estonia, they say journalists come and they show up and they film them and they leave. So again, it's this hopelessness and this desperation of these are people who should be helping us, but they're just here to just see us and then leave and report the story, but not really do anything to help. And they go back to Russia, and the situation becomes even more intense in Russia.
It's funny because I know we just watched this now, but the thing I remember the most is the happy part.
Yeah, well, it's also the most recent.
I remember the very... Did they mention in the Family First or whatever you read about mentions of rape?
No, they did not.
They didn't because
there is a scene.
So I don't want to describe it, but there's a scene where you definitely know
this
something
is when they're
bad
back in Russia,
where their sexual assault is happening to a woman, and the only reason they get away from the police is because.
They take his father's watch that he was wearing.
They take his father's watch. They're like, we're going to throw you in the back. And it's like, none of them have any money. And they're like, basically like, get out of the car. And then all the cops go into the car.
But she can pay in another way, is what they say.
And it's not a good scene, but there were like 10 things I thought they could have done to be like more exploitative of it. And they weren't. They were just very much like the door closes, the cops go in, the door closes, and
and it's told from his point of view because that's all he saw. And then it also goes into his guilt about he was a child, but about what I should have done more. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit here, because we've talked about a major chunk of the story, but there's still way more.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into it detail for detail because I really think you should experience it as a whole in the documentary. But I want to talk a little bit about the animation itself. We are an animation podcast.
Yes.
And I enjoyed when it went from kind of shadows and not very detailed to detailed. I don't know what that's called, but they did that throughout.
It was
because it opened in the beginning with kind of the shadowy figures and not super detailed, and then it happens kind of periodically throughout, and it's very much like to fit in with the tone of what's happening with the story.
When some of the worst stuff is happening, it does it very blurry. Like, just kind of like when he's talking about like what happened in Estonia and the people.
Yeah, and I liked the look of it. I just don't know what it's called.
I don't know what the Carley, get at us. But I agree with you. The other thing that was interesting to me was the low frame rate. Like, it wasn't like very smooth. It was kind of like choppy, but like I think that was. I mean, I think it gave it kind of like a sense of like it wasn't trying to be cartoonish, even though it was legitimately animated. Mm-hmm. It felt very real, even though it was less realistic looking because it wasn't really rotoscoped. It was just it looked like it was. I think it was done from. reference.
Did you come across any facts
Yes.
on that at all?
I saw that they were like, they said it wasn't rotoscope. They were doing reference. Like when he's lying down and they're taking pictures of him.
Yeah.
That's all. That's like really what it looked like.
I see. And that's the other thing we should mention here too. Names and locations were changed to protect his identity. So it's
Yes.
still something that he is concerned about, to the extent that they altered the story as far as names and locations
Yes.
go.
He's billed everywhere as just Amen. Like when they said like, they basically did something where it was like the executive producers and it was the name of the interviewer and Amen. Like didn't give him a last name. I think it was just like, he's that's most of the
they've
reason
gone
why they did
to
that.
pretty great lengths, which you can understand why once you
I mean,
watch the documentary as to why.
one thing that was very cool was the last shot that was Amen and his boyfriend doing something and they walk off screen and then it cuts to the actual like
the picture
footage
of it, yes,
of the
of
landscape
that
they were
view.
standing in. And I think that was to say like this all happened, blah, blah. And I think that was a very interesting artistic choice.
And they do talk about, again, I really recommend you go and watch it, but it also navigates his current feelings. So he's kind of processing how he's feeling about this and telling this story for the first time while he's in this relationship with someone who cares deeply for him and he cares for his partner, as well as he's finishing his research at Princeton. So he's traveling to the US. And so he's also dealing with, what do I tell my partner? You can tell there's friction there, and in the end it does resolve. And they have a really sweet moment at the end that I think was such a great way to end a documentary that was so heavy and so
that's the thing I want to get across is like, you don't watch this movie, like there's a light at the end of the tunnel and it's a bright light and it's very good.
And even if there wasn't, it's still a very important story to be told. But I think the way that they narrated it, I think you needed that at the end.
Well, there was literally a part where I thought something bad was going to happen and it turned out to finally be something good.
Yes.
And I was just like so relieved. I remember turning, I'm like, I just need this kid, which is funny because I think at that part in the movie,
I think
like
he's
22
an adult.
or something.
Yeah, but that's...
And I'm like, I just need this kid. I need something to happen good to this kid, and it does.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, thank God. I think that's might be a little easier to watch this than that, knowing
that, yeah. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to cover.
I think this was going to be a quick one. I just wanted to, I do recommend I think it was important that people like you and I saw this. People who have, before this, like they're talking about the reporters just filming and leaving. Like that was our exposure in some ways.
Well,
to this type of
and
thing.
we were not very familiar with what all happened in Afghanistan at that point in time.
Right.
Was he born in 1984? He was young in 1984.
He was young in 1984.
He was
because he's running around in a
That's right. Yeah, that's
in
when
a house dress listening to Aha.
Yeah,
which I'm
maybe
like,
5 or 6.
The most joyous thing I could think of.
I don't know if I'm guessing his age.
Yeah.
But so we were not super familiar with that, where some of you may be more familiar than we were. And I think it's important that these stories are told authentically, and I think they were very successful at that.
Yeah. So next time, guys, we'll have a little bit more of, I think, a kind of a little less weighty episode. I think this one's important, but and we've discussed doing all the Oscar nominated animated films sometime on this podcast. I think this was a good taste of it for us. I think there's going to be more like this.
Well, and I think as they come up, if something, now that, things come up as we're recording, we're always happy to take a look at them. And that was kind of what happened with this one.
Yeah. So let us know what you think. Let us know if this is interesting. If you see the movie, tell us what you think. If you've got a background that's maybe more close to Amen's story and you want to voice anything about that, let us know. 787-YO-TRPD1, TR Princess Diaries at gmail.com. Get at us. Let us know what you think.
Instagram and Facebook.
We're all over the place. If you don't know how to get a hold of us, call us and I will call you back and I will tell you. No, I'm just kidding.
Just listen to our intro or our outro.
Yes,
rather.
absolutely. But next time, I believe next is Meet the Robinsons.
I believe that's the next full episode.
So we have not recorded that yet because that's ours, and that's still in that kind of that bumper where we're kind of.
Well, we've enjoyed everything that was in that. For the most part.
Chicken Little.
You really didn't like Chicken Little.
Oh, it was all right.
I enjoyed it.
I would definitely, and this is not a Chicken Little episode, but I definitely would have liked it a lot less if Parker and Jack had.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed the experience watching it with the two of them. So go listen to our Chicken Little episode. It just was released last week.
And, let us know what animated movie you think it's going to be. Is it going to be Flea? Is it going to be Encanto? Raya the Last Dragon, Mitchell versus the Machines, or Luca. Let us know.
Oh, we should do a poll. We should do a quick poll on Facebook. See what people think.
But yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Enjoy the Oscars.
Thanks for listening to Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
If you want to tell us your favorite Disney villain and why it's guest on, send us an email at trprincessdiaries@gmail.com.
Or you can send a tweet about how great Maleficent is to @TRPDiaries.
Check out our Facebook group by searching for Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries.
Tara and Ryan's Princess Diaries are available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, and many more.
Wherever you hear us, please be our knight in shining armor and give us a 5-star review.
Thanks again, and until next time, remember to always live happily ever after.